few minutes late. Sorry about that. My regular nemesis, technical issues. I didn't realize that the problem I had was that I didn't realize that the switch into horizontal rather than portrait on the mobile for a live session has to take place before you go live. I thought that was something that you could do after you went live. So I have solved it and hopefully it won't be an issue. So we're looking at drawing streetscapes and dealing with the clutter. That's my aim in this video. And there are, I guess, three issues. So by streetscapes, I mean a scene where we have a view of a street, obviously. So we've got buildings. G'day there. We've got buildings, but we've also got other things in front. Now, it depends on the scene. It could be cars in the street, could be signs, could be trees and shrubs, could be garbage bins. Depending on what's happening in the street, it could be a cafe and there could be tables and chairs out the front. There could be things on the far side of the street. We could be catching things very close on the near side of the street if we're across the street when we're looking at the view or when we took the photo. It's actually good morning for me. It's probably about 8:10 now. I was hoping to start this at 8 and I'm still trying to get my eyes to work, which if you're young may seem strange, but yeah, just getting the light bouncing around in there and focusing. And yeah, so with the streetscape, we often, when we get down to ground level, we have this multi-layered subject. And from drawings I've looked at, and I think just from the challenge of drawing myself, I know this can be a difficult area. Often when we're drawing, we actually want to draw the buildings behind or the visual impact of the whole row of shops and so forth. But in practice, this lower ground level section, which as I said is very complex because it's very layered, can be very difficult to draw and can be a challenge. And I think the temptation is that we oversimplify it to avoid it. That's good, Ian. I hope. I have chosen a streetscape scene that is a streetscape, but it's one that I'm hoping I can complete in a relatively shorter period of time. Streetscapes can take a lot of time, depending on the architecture that we have, the above street level, and then how much detail there is. But I've certainly got numerous layers of what I call clutter, which doesn't mean that they're not interesting things. But often the clutter, though, it's the effect of all the clutter together that really brings in the character of this particular streetscape, this particular location. And so if we simplify it too much, which is often the temptation, if we don't ignore it completely, if we simplify it too much, then we lose a sense of the scene, which really is an integral part of what we're looking at and visually the impact that it has. So I've chosen a scene, and the first issue is one of scale. One thing I notice over and over again when I look at streetscape drawings is that not so much in the architecture part a bit higher up, but in the lower down section at street level, there's a scale problem. So if you were to look at one part, let's say there's a figure in front of the building and further along there's a garbage can or a bus stop, they don't meet up in terms of size. They don't go together. So the figure might be, I don't know, half the size of the bus stop, whereas in life the figure would be taller in proportion, or the bus stop might be too small, or it might be giant and in effect be the same size as the building behind. And I think one of the reasons this happens is that because the street level things are closer, we start with them. But when we start, we haven't really established the scale in our scene, which means it's difficult when we draw our figure or our garbage bin, bus stop, building, whatever the closest thing is that we feel that we have to start with. It's hard to get that right. It's hard to get that scale for that thing correct because there's nothing on our paper around it. And let's say it's a bus stop, a bus shelter. And so it's basically a box shape that I'm looking straight at. Right, thanks Ian. by looking straight at it, then the problem the problem is we don't have to draw it much too large. And suddenly, if we're now going to draw the building behind it, the building has to be a lot larger so that the bus stop relatively is the same, and so forth. And that's the problem. We draw the first things too large or too small because in the overall scene, they're not a large part, even if they're in front compared to the architecture. And then we basically run out of paper with the architecture. Or we draw it too small, and now if we draw our building and now if we draw our building to scale to the bus shelter, it's going to be too small. So the way I get around that is I always start with the building. I start with the big thing because it's much easier once I've established the largest elements to now draw the smaller but closer ones. Now the problem with that is the overlap, and that's, yeah, whenever we've got multi-layered things going back into depth of plane, that's always the challenge. So it's being aware of the issues firstly, and then I'll just talk about my thinking and my strategizing, because I think this really is a strategizing issue. We need to look at our drawing and identify the depth of plane, identify the clutter, see it. We can't draw it if we haven't seen it, but we also can't strategize with it if we haven't seen it. And so I'll flip the camera, pop it on, and please add comments onto the chat. I won't be able to see them because I won't be looking onto the screen. I'll be looking onto the drawing. And let's see how this one turns out. Always a bit of pressure with a live demo drawing. And please, if you find this topic interesting, please just look up my nostrils for a minute while I flip it round. There we go. And here we have it. And I'll just adjust this so that we're a bit closer. Move that stand now, and I can bring it more into the light. Sorry, it is morning here, and we are into autumn, and so the sun's a bit lower in the sky. How's this going? It's still a bit low down. Hang on. Yep, and that should get a bit lighter when I draw. Okay, here we go. So I've actually been playing around with uni pens for various reasons lately. Well, just for the last 2 or 3 drawings. But I don't have a 0.1. None of the stores I've gone to have had the 0.1. So I'm using my Copic 0.1. I normally don't mix brands, and I normally wouldn't recommend mixing brands. But that's just how it is. At this point, I don't have a 0.2 that's usable in Copic anymore. I can't get parts for it, and they only make it in the one with replaceable parts. So that's one of the reasons I'm trying something else. But I'll use the 0.1 for this. So here we have a church, and we have several layers of plans. So we've got this. I mean, the actual closest things are these metal sort of I don't know, plumbing things. I think they're hydrants for. I was in a car park to sort of a little estate, like a shopping centre area, off-street shopping area, and I think they're for the fire hoses, should that be needed. And then we've got this pole here, and then across the road we've got some cars. A bit further back we've got this tree, which visually is, and we also have, and then we have a raised section with a garden bed, and we have a row of trees behind that. And this is where it's important to note that this tree is significantly in front of these. And so when I draw it, I want to create the feeling that this is in front of this. And then behind that, we have the church. And behind that, we have some trees. So quite a lot of depth of plane happening here. So let's see how it goes. I haven't had my coffee yet, so maybe... So that's the strategizing. It's looking carefully, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing at the back and come forward, but I'm going to try and do it in a way that I preserve the white paper around the closer thing and then hold off drawing that part of the further back thing until I establish where the boundary of that is. And therefore, I'm also going to be doing my best to draw the further things with an appropriately light feel and with less impact than I'll draw the closer things. Less detail. Try and have a lighter, looser feel to help reflect the fact that it's further away. And I'll do the opposite with the closest things. I'll use a heavier pen and draw a little more slowly, a little more intentionally, to create a more solid and therefore closer look. So we've identified the depths of plane going back. We've worked out and that not just is this tree different, but this one here is different to this one behind in terms of depth, because this one is sort of on the corner here. So there's some distance back to there, whereas these ones and this one are about on the same depth. So it's seen at first, because we can't capture it if we haven't seen it. Okay? So now I will start. And I'm going to start on this corner of the tower. But I'm really just wanting to draw this upper section at the start. Okay. There's a clock here that this 0.1 is very fine. How's that going? Really trying to get the effect of the detail there, not draw it precisely. Ah, goodness me. So I need to show some caution here. I also need to try and keep my lines straight, don't I? Okay, so I'm not coming down further there because I need to, even this has probably come down a bit far there, but we won't worry about that just yet. So once I draw this, I've got a sense of scale that I can use. And I'm keeping this light, and I'm not going to make it heavier, perhaps at all, but I'll wait till I've drawn the closer elements. It is, I don't have a problem in the live sessions of jabbering on, but it is certainly more of a challenge to draw at the same time as all the jabber. And I've got this here. And I might establish this window here as well, because that will help me get a sense of scale. Yeah, that looks about right. Actually, I've come down way too far there, haven't I, now that I look at it? Never mind. I can make an adjustment with the foliage. I'll grab a mouthful of my cold tea. So now I go up. This is the sort of detail where I find the challenge is not to make it too large. So I'm just looking at this for now. Okay. Sometimes when we have this sort of thing, and the angle's not well, it's on a fairly small scale, I actually find it kind of looks more natural just to do a curve. There's a lot of forgiveness in this at not getting the angle quite right. Whereas if we go for the angle, and we don't get it right, it can be a lot more obvious than just a kind of a bit of a fudge effect. Now, for this sort of thing, always work out how far you want it to be. And again, and then there's a perspective angle here. And down here. Okay, this one sticks up over the back. Alrighty, and there we go. And look, if you look clearly and closely at that, you'll see that I have approximated what's there because I'm trying to create the effect, not draw all of this crenellated detail. I better make the clock look a bit more like a clock. Again, not too much detail. Okay, so I don't feel the need at this stage to do the rest of the church because what I want to do now is to establish some of the further detail. So I'm switching from the point 1, just put the lid back on that, to the point 2. And now I really want to define this. Now we're establishing the top kind of silhouette line here, but also need to make sure we don't come down too far as I did here, because that is a fairly common, easy thing. Now, although I'm using the point 2 and I want this to have a stronger, heavier, visually stronger effect, I'm still going fairly lightly with holding the pen. And this is a new pen as well, which means there's a good ink flow. I find them very comfortable to hold. They feel a bit lighter in even. So at this stage now, the important thing is to establish with all trees, so that they don't creep, they don't get longer, is to work out where we want the bottom to be. So here's the bottom of, when I do a demo, I always put 4 dots, if you haven't noticed, for the corners of my reference, and that just gives me an extra reference point. And I don't want to come down too far, or I'm not going to have the gutter in the right place. So, and the center of the tree lines up, and this is where alignment I find is invaluable. So we're lining it up there, we're coming down there. So I don't really want this to be lower than there. So I'm kind of looking at something about that. So now I know I need to fit what's left in there. So sometimes to break up an object into different components helps us keep the proportions correct. And please, I'm not looking at the chat, and I really can't do that at this point, but you can certainly talk to each other if you want, and perhaps share some of your frustrations with Streetscapes, or if you've got any thoughts or tricks or things that you've just habits, ways you tackle Streetscapes that you think might be helpful for others, then please share them. Now, as well as the shade, we also have the color of these trees. So the color is darker than the building behind. And I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to do hatching for the color as well as for the shadows and the shade. And I don't need to decide right now. So one of the things is try and have self-control and don't commit to things right now that we don't have to commit to. And I think it's something such as that. So it's because once that ink's on the paper, it ain't coming off. So we want to make sure that we keep it as neat looking as possible. All right, so having done that, now we have some more foliage behind. So I might actually, by going off this, just establish some line there. I might now continue the building out so I get a sense of what's happening. I'll add this detail here as well. And I suppose I'm looking at this. This is where we do need to pay attention. So here I have a street sign. Probably says no parking. They all seem to say no parking around here. And I was going to make a point of drawing this in early and coming down. So I think what's going to end up, I have stretched slightly sideways. So I'm just going to move this a little bit to the left and make room just to still do that. And I was going to use the 0.3 for that. Although I probably, not quite ready for that. All right, so back to, there's no reason now why I can't finish the roof of the church, so I think I will, so that it's done. And it looks like there's every chance this roof line is going to be behind these. And this is where we have a perspective angle, lining up these things. And so it's going to be, and the corner is sort of like there. And it goes to there. Okay, got that done. Ugh. If you've joined, welcome. Okay, so now we've got this palm tree. Now it's quite some way back, so I'm gonna, I think, at least start by trying it with the 0.3. And the top of this, the crown of this, sort of lines up with here. And of course, if we're drawing on location, I still do this. I align with what I see in front of me. It doesn't matter whether I find it from a photo or... And again, work out what does the top align with. And where's the center of this ball going to be? If it's from there to there, it's going to be about there. And this all just helps me to get the scale correct. And the other thing I might do, just to help me get the... do a few fronds with palms that just establish how wide it's going to be at the start. And now you know, without having to look yet closely at every single one, and again, we're still wanting to just draw the effect of this. And what I might do is I'll keep going with this. And we want to allow for the random nature. It would be very easy to just do fronds without thinking and fill in all the gaps. And yeah, that's not helpful. So control is important, and also keeping these fronds small enough so that the tree sits further back, that we realize this is actually a very large date palm. I think it's a date palm, something like that. These were very popular, being planted in Victorian and early 20th century period, and so the ones that have survived are wonderfully large. Who enjoys drawing palm trees? I reckon they're a great subject to draw. They're kind of so sculptural, and yet they're also fussy with detail, and therefore they're a great example for trying to work out a sense of capturing the effect without trying to draw individual fronds. And I'm thinking I'm going to sort of leave this for now, because the danger is at this stage I put too much ink onto it and it brings it too close forward, and it is it's probably almost as far back as the closest part of the church. So leave that for now. And I won't do these windows till I finish these, I don't think. So, and so I've got this here, and it sort of comes down forward to there. Okay, I'm not going to rush to do this because I've got some, I'm not even sure what that is. I think it's just some sort of raised edge. Okay, so here's a corner, so that's going to be significant. And again, I'm aligning it with what I've already done and the tree, so. So this here is kind of like where this is going to be. Okay. There's a church sign poking out from behind there, so I'm going to try and include that because that will just visually give a little bit of a difference to silhouette for the tree because there'll be white behind it, and just break up a little bit. And so this comes down to like there. Okay, so this is actually a hedge, and it comes to there. What we want to do is avoid doing long, hard lines, which really, at the end, are going to suggest a form and a shape that's really, I think, not helpful. Can you hear that dog yelping away? Some doors down. Gosh, someone let him out or give him something to eat or something. Okay, so we're just trying to suggest get a sense of this. And now this one is actually closer than this one. So look, I'll switch to the 0.3 for this. I don't know whether I would if I were doing I was going to say a real drawing, but you know what I mean. But for the demo, let's see how it looks. So this sort of lines up with there. Oh, I picked up the 0.5. I wasn't using that. Where's the 0.3? The good thing about these pens is because they have the size down there, you can actually see what I'm using, whether I mention it or not. And I want it to come down to, well, to the dot, don't I? I've done worse. So in the end, it's actually quite a light line because I was being very cautious in drawing it. And now, see, this is what I want to do. I want to just take this slightly behind it because that helps give a sense of what's happening. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky because I want to establish this car and keep the car to the right scale. I'm not a great car drawer. I don't particularly have a great interest in cars, so I really have to observe what I see in my reference or in front of me because I don't have memory of cars and how they look, and I haven't drawn them more than I've had to. So all of that. But I also want to get a sense of this distance and here. So where did I say this corner was going to be? So the sign's there. Yeah, so the challenge here is I really have no idea what's happening, but anyway, that's okay. So, I better put this sign in first because it's just on the outside. So, I haven't even finished that. I don't want to make this section too large. And I'm not going to come down too far. Oh, there's a railing here I missed that I'm going to pop in because I don't think it'll make any difference. But I do need this ground level. I would be much faster than this if I wasn't on camera. Is this a cup of coffee? Oh, wonderful. Thank you, darling. It's okay, you're not on camera. My wonderful wife has just brought me the most fragrant cup of coffee that I'm desperately in need of a mouthful of. Yeah, and some water too. She's a great believer in drinking water with coffee. I think it's the Austrian in her ancestry. Oh, it's very hot. Ah, lovely. I'm sorry I can't read the chat at this point. But if you're enjoying this, please hit the like button. And if you haven't got time to watch it all now, it'll be obviously posted as one of my live videos. So come back and watch it at another time. So I also need to keep these lines now relative to what's happening here. If you've not heard me talk about the difference between thinking of drawing with marks and drawing with lines, honestly, since I realised that I draw with marks, not lines, and that lines is just one of the mark options available, it has, I think, absolutely revolutionised. What am I jabbering about? I didn't want to put that there. Needs to be just a little bit lower. And this is important because I need to fit the car so it looks like it's in the gutter. So let's just bite the bullet and give it a go, eh? So this front corner of the car is going to line up about there. So I'm only just going to get it in the right place. And so I'm now sort of looking at this. And so now I'm looking at this. But I'm also looking at this. It's very easy to do things like this section now too low down, because we look at this and that makes us go down too far. If I look at this, I'm also sort of thinking, well, this and this. So gosh, when I was a lad, headlights were all round. So how's that looking with our gutter? We'll find out soon enough, won't we? So I'm just looking at this now as a shape. Now I've got this happening, so I'm going to have to draw this before I draw any more of the car going back. So that's okay. And this is why when we're drawing something where we get into detail, we need to keep stopping and just checking what the context is, if you like, what the surroundings are demanding of us. Oh, I was forgetting about my coffee. I'm going to put it there where I can see it. I'm drinking it out of a nice King Charles III coronation mug that my son picked up in the Buckingham Palace gift shop for me when he was over there. So okay, so look, it's sort of like just there's some sort of vent thing there. So Anyone else find drawing cars a challenge? Oh dear. Yes, and I've gone too far. I'll be able to fudge that with or improve that, clean that up a bit with some value, but I'll need to draw this in at the end first, I think. But what I can do is I can put this line in. All right, so now I might work just a little more on this foliage here and these elements here. Although actually that's what I was doing. I was gutters are always a bit of a challenge because invariably there's shadow in them, or shade rather, I guess, and at least to some degree. And I do find that, in my opinion, almost always vertical hatching kind of works better than long horizontal lines, which end up giving a very hard edge to it. All right, so now we can just and get back to this rail. So we're going to be creating the rail or giving clarity to it by positive here. So we're drawing the ink, but we're going to actually create the bit that goes back in negative space. And I always find they're nice little kind of details to be able to produce in that way. And I think they create a little bit of visual interest in our scene. They let us sort of see the thing more clearly than we would. But you do have to, again, this is where the strategizing is really important. I often say that one of the problems I see with people drawing is that they just grab the pen and think, oh, look, I'll just start and I'll see what I need to see as I draw. And the problem is you cut off so many options so quickly in doing that. Now, this is the darkest value in the whole thing, so I want it to be the darkest value in my drawing. Please, if you haven't hit the like button yet and you're finding this helpful, please do. So if you missed the very start, I was saying one of the big challenges with this sort of scene is getting the scale consistent. When we have levels of things going back, we have a lot of clutter in the foreground, these hydrant bits that are closest, and this pole here, and then we have the cars across the road. This tree is closer to us, this sign, this is closer, these trees behind, this tree, the palm tree, the church, and the trees in the far distance, and quite a bit of complexity too. It can be challenging, and having a strategy before we start is really helpful for creating a sense of close and moving back. And I'm just having I just realized where my flashbacks are coming from with this. This is now reminding me of a pencil drawing I did on location of Westminster Abbey. It was the very last day of my first trip to Europe, and I was just exhausted, and the other people I was with went into the Abbey, and I still can't believe it, but I was just over big grand buildings and churches, and I sat outside and drew it. I didn't go in because I didn't want to have to stand up and walk. And of course 2 days later I was back in Sydney thinking, I can't believe I was such an idiot. Why didn't I go in? So yeah, I'll have to go in on the next trip. So get back to drawing, shall we? Now there is a rail here, and I think this might be connected with some sort of ramp access, but that's where I'm going to actually simplify this. We don't and I'm going to can I say one of the advantages of enjoying drawing trees and also trying to capture the effect of gardens and whatnot is that when I come across them in scenes such as this, which, let's face it, is really common, I kind of have marks that I'm comfortable with using to create the effects of them. And again, I especially for people who love drawing architecture, and gosh, I certainly get that, don't I? But one of the things I notice is that often the trees and the garden areas end up being a really discernible weak spot. They're not drawn with the same comfort or skill, and sometimes without the same care as the rest of the scene. Okay. So remember, this tree is closer than these ones behind, so I want to have a stronger value and a outline's the wrong word, but a stronger sense of the edging of this, because that's what happens in life. Things that are closer, we have a stronger sense of their edging because it's closer, so we can see it better. So if we want to create an effect in our drawing, because we're obviously not going to be creating the reality, but if we're wanting to create an effect in our drawing that where the thing feels real, then to mimic somehow in our mark making these optical kind of outworkings of how we're viewing and what we're viewing, it can be really is really helpful. And again, it's not about drawing outlines of shapes. It's about capturing a visual effect, and sometimes an outline is a good way to do that. And with architecture, certainly there are strong elements of outline which we want to capture, but it's an inadequate way of thinking, I think, or a limiting way of thinking for capturing visually all of what we see in a scene. if I knew which of the many sketchbooks I can see to my right had the pencil drawing I did on location of Westminster Abbey, I'd grab it and show you. Maybe at the end I'll have a quick look and see if I can find it. And you'll see why you'll understand why I keep okay, so I think I've reached the stage where I've done so much that I'm just starting to slow down without realizing. I'm starting to relax. It's like I'm getting towards the end of the race, and I need someone to, from the sidelines, be shouting at, "Come on, keep going! Come on, you're not there yet! You're not there yet! You know, don't start to. You haven't won." Someone can zip past you at this stage. Okay, so I'm just going to now simplify things that we see here. Notice how when we're thinking of edge and of effect and of value, and we just start to find marks to somehow capture the effect that we're seeing and the values that we're seeing, somehow well, on a good day anyway, the forms just appear, the shapes appear, the thing just appears, and it ends up appearing in a far more satisfying way than if we tried to outline shapes. I can remember, I think I must have been at most in my early 20s, because I really didn't do anything about art as an adult after that point. But, you know, people talking about mark making instead of lines, and I just thought it all sounded so pretentious. Oh, for goodness sakes, what's the difference? And now I'm so aware of the difference, because I'm so aware of more of the subtlety, I think, of what we're doing when we draw. And it looks a bit like Sideshow Bob's hair, doesn't it? And I'm also so aware that it's about how we think. It's about an understanding of process when we draw that guides and directs the marks that we think and we try to put on the paper. And because we mostly, I think, or it's easy not to appreciate that, or perhaps to agree to it in theory, but in practice not. We've got the pen, we've got the ink splashing on the paper before we've really worked out what we're doing. And the best way to get there. I mean, be honest, how many of you, and maybe you could say this in the chat, which, as I said, sadly I can't look at this point, but maybe you could say, you know, how often do you have the experience of oh, I wish I hadn't put that line there. So I'm not wanting these windows to be competing. Oh, actually, there's some crenellations here. Aren't you impressed that I know that word? Actually, once you've drawn castles, you need to know that word if you draw them for YouTube videos. Now, that's right. There's an entry. I'm just remembering this church, which is in a suburb not too far away from it. That's right. There's an entranceway here, a little like porch area that I noticed. I grabbed this photo the other day. our printer packed it in. This really cheap, like it was an $80 printer about 10 years ago, and I've printed thousands of references from it. So I was a bit sad when it had some sort of meltdown. And of course, I'm at the age and stage in life where every time something like that happens, I'm left thinking, oh, will I be able to connect the new one? Is it going to, are the things that have to recognize each other going to recognize each other? Yeah. And I think am I going to do anything about these shingles on the roof? Do I want to create a sense of value with them? I think I will. I keep telling you how it's counterproductive to not do things because we're afraid of messing up our drawing. And I don't mean being reckless and doing stupid things, but when we actually think, yeah, and that's better. When we actually think, that may make it look better, then that's a good reason to give it a go, because we're always learning to draw. If it ain't a commission, and if it ain't a YouTube video demo, then it's just it's all practice. It's all just having a good time and practicing. Actually, I'm just going to protect that car roof again. Just checking I've got the right pen. Okay, so this will end. Ah, I see, there's a little fence here. Very good. And this tree comes over it. It's all these little things, like the fact that this tree comes over it, that we want to spot whether we're on location or looking at a photo, because that they're the sorts of things that really do give a sense of tangled depth with this. And even in a quick sketch, sometimes there are, not that this is a particularly quick sketch, but there are times where we have to go slow and just get in a nice sharp edge. And if you haven't tried this before with a bit of paper where you have a straight edge and you need to do some hatching, it really is a great and easy way. Is it consistent with a freehand drawing? I think so. Let's not make life too hard for ourselves, eh? And actually, there is a slight shadow here, so I'm actually going to put a slight, some hatching here. just to help it be easier to understand what's happening. So I'm using my 0.1 for this. And that helps, doesn't it? You know. After you've done something, always stop and think, did that create the effect that I wanted? Has it made it slightly easier to understand what's happening visually? Oh my goodness, I'm on low battery. Why am I on low battery? I see why I'm on low battery, because I plugged my charger in and stuck it into the phone before I started, and I didn't turn on the PowerPoint. So I'm glad I saw that. Did you see? I wonder if you saw that. Did you see the low battery thing come up? Well, there's the coffee gone. Okay, so before I finish with these things in the very front, I'm going to do these trees in the back. And I wasn't thinking of using it, but I do have a 0.05 with these uni pens, and I don't usually use a 0.05. I find it's just a bit, but I am going to give it a go here with these trees. So I really don't want to get caught Sorry, I'm just laughing because having just sculled the last bit of my coffee, I realised I was about to let out an almighty belch. I just remembered that this ain't like when I'm normally sitting here drawing, where I do the voiceover separately later, and I start by removing the music and any sounds that happen from me or around me at the same time. Now, like, why did I do that? Because I was jabbering and not paying attention. But that's okay. I think it's all still light enough that I just have to make things around it a bit darker though, so it doesn't look so out of place. Less jabbering and more drawing, eh? So if you missed at the start, I started by saying it's really important to analyze all the depth of planes that we have, particularly when some of them, like these two bits down here, aren't as obvious. Oh, bye-bye, darling. Are you coming back afterwards? Okay, bye. My wife just opened the door to say goodbye. She's off somewhere. So, yeah, so these are a little bit now feel a little bit closer than I wanted, because I did go darker there without realizing, without paying attention. So but hopefully there's a sense that these trees, although they're further away, are closer than these ones. So now I'll do these trees on the other side. Again, I will have a look at what's in the chat afterwards, when I go off being live. So I'd love to hear, do you, when you draw, have a range of widths, and of pen widths, and do you use them? When you do the one drawing, do you vary the pen width to help you create certain effects? wonder whether that's better with this is better with a 0.1, because in here we are closer than over there. So it's all about kind of like relative values. It's not really so much how dark have I made this, but how does this degree of darkness read off the darkness that's around it, and is it sane? Is it creating the effect that I want? And if it doesn't, and it confuses our drawing rather than helps our drawing, then we learn as much, as I say, we learn as much from the things that don't turn out the way we'd planned or hoped as we do from the things that are successful. And so we want to look hard rather than tear it up and run away. We want to look hard at what hasn't worked out and see, what have I learned for next time? Put the lid on the 0.5, Stephen, and come back down here to this 0.2. Look, I think what I might do is I might actually get my 0.3, which I haven't used yet, and I'll use this now for these two sections down here. I barely know what they are, but I'm sure there's some sort of hydrant system. Okay, so I've got this pipe here that it just really comes in from the right there. Oh, well. Win some, you lose some. Where's my 0.2? Oh, is minor 0.2. I can do that at least. And now we'll try on this side. So what have I got here? I'll start. Okay, I think this is actually some sort of, there's a corner there, I think. It doesn't really matter. I can just try and draw what there is. Now I just want to align this. So it's going to be about here. Almost looks like it could be part of the car, doesn't it? With this little wheel-shaped thing. Oh, actually, I think this wheel was much larger than I thought. And it works better if I make it larger. And if you're wondering why I'm drawing these, I did say at the start, look, if I was doing this on location, I actually wouldn't do this. It's just that because this is a demo on drawing Streetscape, clutter, I thought the more clutter that that I did, the better. Washington, one of my children just came back from Washington. She had a lovely time there. New York and Washington. So I haven't actually seen her photos yet, but I'm hoping to be able to use them in my drawing demo. So you may actually see some of your, I hope, some of your Washington monuments in some of my drawing videos coming up, and some of the New York ones as well. So almost done. I'm just going to tidy up this area down here and just resolve resolve things that are happening in them. Again, notice how far back I'm holding my pen. I find that helps me make the sort of marks, the sort of loose light marks I want, because the further back we hold our pen, and I'm actually just thinking this as I talk, the easier it is to get a lighter line. That's why I've been doing it more and more. As I've been trying to get a greater range of marks, I find I instinctively or intuitively move my fingers further back, because if we think of a lever, it balances more. And so if we hold it down here, we have to actually make an effort to bring the weight of the pen down, and we are pressing down more. It's fairly unavoidable. It's harder to get a light line. But when I stand right back and I pivot the pen on this point, it touches, we can control the connection with the paper, and it can connect much more lightly, and therefore we can, even with the one pen, get a great range of marks. Yeah, okay, that's good to have thought out. Maybe I'll make a video on that. Now here, I am going to hatch the whole thing, I think, because I want to create the contrast between the darker value of the colour of these bushes and the whiteness of the, well, not the whiteness, but the lighter value of the church behind. And I'm exaggerating the amount this bush goes behind this pole to just strengthen visually the fact that this sits in front, because these are very low down in the picture plane. This is to the side, but it's higher up, and so we're going to see it more, particularly if it's highlighted by negative space. And so by making it clear this bush is behind it, we actually create the effect of this post coming towards us. And because this now is a lot closer than, say, this car or this tree, suddenly this church is further away. And so we have this lovely greater sense of depth, that we're actually looking across at a scene. And if you're enjoying this and it's helpful, or you even just like my drawing, please hit the like button for me. That would be great. When you do hatching, remember, we don't just have to hatch from the top down, which is probably the more natural. When, such as I have here, I actually want to keep a straight line, or at least a clean edge. And if it's a straight line, we can just do this trick. But if it's a curve, then a better way of doing it is simply starting on the side where we want the cleaner edge. I find that's very helpful. But what we do need to do is be ready to start moving the second the line, the pen hits the paper. Otherwise, we can get a lot of like ink blotches, and depending on the pen and the paper, that may be better or worse, but we can end up with basically this effect from where we touch the paper but haven't started to move yet, and so we want to avoid that. As I said, this is actually closer than these, and so I'm trying to just add a little more value to it, and perhaps some stronger lines. To give that sense. And now we have over here. And what have we got happening here? Oops, okay. I should have allowed a step in there. But I ain't going to worry about that. Oh, I see what's here. I don't know whether it's too late to kind of... some sort of hydrant thing. Gosh, hydrants everywhere here. I don't remember there being lots of fires there. There, how's that looking? And you know, notice that I haven't gone right up here with the value for this because I'm wanting to create the separation. So it's manipulating positive and negative space all the time as we draw. And this is why we can't actually decide our final marks too early on in the drawing, because we haven't created we read values against other values, and so we really have to develop the values, the lights and darks. And see, what I want in my finished drawing is that in general terms, the areas that are darkest here are darkest here. Oh, that's one thing I was going to do. Do I want to do it or not? I was going to play around with this car and the values of the side of the car. Oh, okay, and this. Don't want to try and well, why not? I mean, I keep saying just do it. So let's just do it, eh? If it doesn't work, you'll know not to try this at home. What do you think? Has that improved it? Was that? I think that's yeah, that's helped, I think. And I'll just, I realized I hadn't finished this. Hey there, Mohan. Yep, my pleasure. Now I don't want to make this as black as it is there. I want to give it a sense of darkness, but not as solid, because I'm juggling wanting it to be further back than these things. Yeah. Look, I think, oh, hang on, I better just continue the gutter. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether I can just quickly get my hands on that sketchbook I was telling you about that has, not that one. Not that one. It's not that. Isn't that one? No, it's not that one. Got to be closer to it now, surely. It's this one. No, it's not that one. While you're waiting, if you haven't seen it, that's the location pencil sketch I did of Notre Dame with my daughter that in 2018 that kind of started me off on drawing. I pulled out virtually everyone and had a squeeze. So it has to be one of these ones. Surely. Well, for some reason I must have stuck it somewhere different. But yeah, sorry. Oh gosh, that's not good. So I just realised another book was wedged in somewhere, and that was squeezing it. So, yeah, I'll leave that. So, what do you think? You're going to have a go? I'll post this on my channel community page as per normal. So if you want to have a go drawing this sort of nice little church, I haven't done this roof here, but I think actually I quite, and I didn't put this sign in. I did stretch out slightly. I'm probably 5 millimeters over on this side, but yeah. What do you think? Let me just have a quick. I'll just get the this off the thing, and I'll just stick it in this stand so that I'm not holding it and it's not jerking around so much. And I'll switch this around, and here I am. Now I don't know how I can actually. The chat just sort of pops up. Ah, right. Okay. Here are all the comments. Oh, gosh. Yes. Thank you. G'day. Drop links to this session on all. Ah, thanks, Ian. Greetings to everyone. Straight to detail. I thought we'll start from the big shape. Yeah, I don't know, Poolbring, if you're still there, but it's the way. I mean, look, sometimes I do start with a big shape, or I start with a larger portion. The problem is I'm drawing directly in ink, and so I'm not using pencil underdrawing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not kind of a moral superiority decision. It's the way I want to be able to draw, and it's partly because my pencil drawings. I was becoming more. I did start drawing in pencil, and I was becoming more and more focused on correcting mistakes. And I found the better I became at drawing, the more quickly I saw things that weren't right, and I would immediately be trying to erase them and less able to tolerate them. And well, quite frankly, it was starting to make drawing become this tense, miserable affair of erasing more marks than were left on the drawing at the end. So that's why I thought, look, if I drew in ink, I would have to kind of like just push past marks that aren't perfect. And Mosen, stop drawing because you had to study. Reduce your expectations of what drawing is so that you can continue it while you're studying. You probably wouldn't think that you couldn't sit and watch half an hour of Netflix a day when you're studying. So why not do 30 minutes, 20 minutes of drawing a day, or every second day, or 3 days a week? Because my guess is you probably have longer rather than shorter drawings, or you did before you started studying. Maybe every drawing took you an hour or 2 hours to do. And so in your mind, that's what a drawing session is, and you actually don't have time to do that now, which can obviously be the case. So why not just go with a much smaller expectation of what you're doing, and perhaps change the way you do it. I mean, this is, oh dear, I'm just trying to grab something off the wall here. Oh, sorry, I'm showing you close up of my beard. This actually began as a doodle on a scrap of paper that I was having fun with. So I stuck another scrap of paper on, and I guess that was 10 minutes of playing around. And I hadn't done the video that I did the other day where I drew this. I think it's the Radcliffe camera. Is that what it's called? Is it the Radcliffe camera or Radcliffe lantern? Anyway, whatever it is, in Oxford. And but I had some photos from a friend that I was excited to have the chance to draw with, and I was just playing around with it. But like that was like 10, 12 minutes without any pressure, and therefore I could go fast. I could just go for it because I wasn't doing a sort of a proper drawing. So in my mind. But of course, that often really frees us up to just go for it and to get a bit of energy and vitality in our mark making, and to learn things that we don't learn when we're doing a 3-hour drawing that we're trying to be very careful with. it lets us be a lot more sketchy. I think of, some people use sketch and drawing interchangeably. I tend to think of a drawing as a more considered thing, and a sketch as a lighter, looser, faster, more of a grab for an impression, rather than a depiction of an object and of detail. I'm not saying I'm always consistent with that, but in my mind, that's how it works. And if you haven't hit the like button yet, please do. That would be helpful for me. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how long this, here it is, I don't know how long this took me if I hadn't been trying to talk at the same time. I certainly slowed down because I was trying to concentrate and pay attention to talking as well as to drawing. But I think, you know, there was a bit of strategizing here. And again, if you've watched this from the beginning and you heard me talking through my process and just all the thinking I was doing, I get amazed at how many people pick up a pen and rush to start copying. And I think the heart of the problem comes in the thought that when I draw, I'm copying a reference, and therefore I just need to start copying, rather that I'm translating it. Now, translation in it, the word and the concept does have a sense of, well, I need to think about it. I need to work out what is it that's being said, and how can I say that in the language that I'm going to translate it into. And so visually, you know, what is it that's being said in my photo? What's, if you like, what's the message here? What's the message that's there? And what words can I use in my new language to translate it? So what marks can I make that will not copy this, because it's impossible to copy this. I mean, look at all the detail we can see in the tree. So I'm not going to copy it. I'm going to translate it into marks that will say something, that will say the same thing, but in the language that I have at my disposal now, which is an ink mark on paper language. So, you know, when we start to think that way, it becomes clear that is it just the so I'm just trying to read messages that are jumping up on the paper, and I just can't focus as easily as I used to be able to that quickly. Yeah, love of drawing is a great thing, and let's face it, we don't have to draw. So yes, probably a love of drawing is making you want to draw, because you know, there are lots of things in life we have no choice about, but drawing, for most of us, is not one of those. So let's, you know, if we have that, if we have a desire to do something such as draw, it's probably because we feel like we want to have something to say. And that's as good a reason as any to try and say it, to try and get it out, I think. So, yeah, you know, but it is a language to explore. And again, if you're learning French or German or Mandarin, any language, Hindi, any language at all that you don't know already, you don't try and say too much too quickly, because you can't, and you recognize that you can't. And yet with drawing, I think, again, beginners often try and say too much too quickly in their drawing. And by that I mean they rush to do something which is just way too advanced for where they're at, and that they don't have a chance of doing well. And the real danger is they don't know enough to know that perhaps they haven't done a good drawing. And sometimes I see people impressing themselves with what they've done, but there are lots of issues that will hold them back from really developing good drawing skills. And I don't mean to draw like me, I mean to draw in whatever way they want to draw. And so sometimes it's not as obvious with drawing as with other things, where we need to start at a fairly simple level, and we need to make sure that what we're doing well. Yeah, that's right. Where can I find reference photos for perspective and environment studies? Look, if you go to my channel community page, um, every demo I do. So for this drawing, I will, after I get off the phone. I was going to say after I get off the phone, I'll post my photo of this onto that. Unfortunately, I think the community page only, and I think they call it posts now, but the community page only holds about the last 500 posts. Now, most of these posts are my reference photos, but it means you can't go back to see like every single one for every single videos, because I've got 1,200 videos, something a bit more than that, and probably 850 of them are drawing demos with a posted photo. So the earlier ones are not going to be accessible. But if you click on the video itself, every video where I draw from a reference, the reference is always visible. It's always there next, so that you can see my translation. And even if I say nothing, I do, I can't help but jabber on, but even if I didn't do a voiceover, what you get to see is what I'm looking at and how I translate it. And I deliberately draw on my reference now more than I used to when I started making videos, so that you can see particularly what I'm looking at and the gap or the height or the alignment that at that point is part of my observation process, which I then take into my drawing session and into my drawing to help me line things up as accurately as I can. And so that's what I am doing, and how I'm doing it. I actually, I think there's very little value in, I'm not trying to badmouth anyone's channels, but from my point of view and my understanding of learning and the learning process, I think there's very little value, if any, in watching a drawing demo where you can't see the reference. It's as if the drawing just appears out of nowhere, and it's sort of like magic. Thank you about that. Yes, it's funny, you don't think of this as being something that will survive you, but of course at my age, yeah, yeah, it's funny thinking that after I'm dead, there'll be people still learning from me. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Wonderful crazy, but crazy. Stephen Travers' art will probably survive Stephen Travers. So there you go. Yeah, but if you can't see the reference, you don't know. What you're reduced to is copying the marks of the demo. So you're copying without understanding of why, of how. And no, I'm not planning to, Dave, don't worry. No, not on my to-do list at all. Don't worry. I'll be staying as active and as able to draw from, well, firstly for my own benefit, but yeah. No, I enjoy the world I'm in at the moment, and I want to, and there's more I plan to do. But yeah, but if we can't see the reference, yeah, then we are reduced to just copying. Thank you. If we, if we're reduced to just seeing a drawing appear, then the most we can do is to copy the marks and the lines that the artist has put in on the paper. But that's actually not the hard part. The hard part is knowing what lines to put and where to put them and what order to put them in. That's the hard part. And I don't learn that at all if I can't see what the artist is translating onto the paper that I can see. Does that make sense? Because I think it's such an important point, because you can spend a lot of time watching drawings appear from nowhere and then trying to keep up and copy, or maybe slowing the video down and trying to draw along. And what you've learnt to do is copy, which is great if that's the skill you want to develop. But if you want to learn to be able to do your own drawings from your own photos or from your own locations that you visit, you haven't learnt the skills that you need to do that. And what set me off to start thinking about this was some comments I got with my very first videos. And because I haven't watched other people's how to draw videos, it never even occurred to me that there'd be videos where you couldn't see the reference. And I began to get comments from people saying, oh, look, my problem is that I do really nice drawings when I copy someone's drawing, but when I go to do my own drawing from my own reference, I don't even know where to start. And I thought, well, of course you don't know where to start because you haven't learned about how you make that choice when you've copied someone else's drawing. You can start anywhere if you're a good copyist and just copy as you go. You can start in one corner and go back and forth, snake around until you cover the whole drawing. You don't need to make a choice of where to start and how to build a drawing. Like what parts to do first, what parts to leave. And of course, it's different for every reference. So it's not learning a method so much. It's not learning do this, do this, do this, do this. It's coming to understand the issues of drawing, so that coming to understand the issues of drawing that we can then apply to the particular reference we have and for the particular drawing we want to create in the time limit we have and any other constraints that we have, whether we have 5 different widths of pens or just one pen and it's in a biro and that's it. You know, to have all the options available in our head, because we've understood the process, we know big picture what is drawing, and therefore I'm afraid I don't know John Frederick. Sorry. I'm not as attuned to the art world as people think. I've just been busy doing my own drawings and working out yeah, what I do. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, your work reminds me of so-and-so, and I look up so-and-so, and I'm always honoured. There's some amazing ink artists out there, particularly in the comic book world, which I've had no involvement with since I was about 15 and stopped reading Superman comics, which I absolutely loved. But you can't go back there, you know. But they weren't comics that you'd look at for the art. They're certainly comics that you would have read for the stories. Ah, yes, Bizarro World. Yes, Bizarro Superman. Does anyone remember those from the 60s and the early 70s, perhaps? Yeah. So so beware of videos where you can't see the reference because you don't get to understand the process and you are reduced to copying, which isn't, and it's not just that copying doesn't train you in all the things you need to do your own drawings, but it doesn't tell you that it doesn't. And therefore, when you know, if you copy this and without looking at my photo and you thought, oh, that looks pretty good, and then you go to do your own and you can't because you've had no insight into what I was doing really, you're just seeing what I did. It's easy then for you to blame yourself, to think, oh, I just mustn't be able to draw because, you know, I can't, and just get discouraged and give up. And that's not the problem at all. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I do get quite annoyed when, I mean, sometimes in a demo, they're demonstrating perspective or something, and so there isn't a reference and they're just making it up. And that's okay, because the point isn't the drawing, it's teaching something, and this drawing is just a vehicle for that. But, you know, even with that, I still think it still makes more sense if we can see the reference, if we can see the reality that is being translated into marks on the paper. And certainly, you know, it's probably only been in the last 12 to 18 months that I've come to fully work out my understanding of the drawing process. And I can change, it can develop. I mean, I thought I had one 3 years ago when I started the YouTube videos, or probably just over 3 years ago now. I thought I had an understanding of what drawing was, and it's changed and developed, and I have no doubt that it will continue to change and develop. But there are many more possibilities when I draw that I'm aware of now with how I understand things now with when I started. And it lets me do, in my mind, better drawings more easily. And when I say better, I'm really meaning create the drawings I have in my mind and get them on the paper by the end, to a greater degree. So it's not better than anyone else's, but I can see improvement for how I'm wanting my drawings to improve. And in the end, that's what we want to do. You know, we we want to look at other artists' work and be inspired and get ideas of marks and effects and so forth, subject matter and so forth. But in the end, it's absorbing all of that and combining it with what we already know, with what we already want to do, with what we think we might want to do, and now making it part of my drawing process, so that it's not as if I'm copying their work, but I'm adding something of their work into my thinking that now starts to show itself, starts to inform in some way, I hope, my work, that the qualities that inspired me or that I thought were great and I'd want to use, that they've somehow now able to come through in my mark making when I see a scene that they've never drawn. That's the thing. I've got, oh, I can see, gosh, this has been almost 2 hours. Stephen, perhaps the time you spent on drawing is quite long. If you could go back in time, would you choose the same path? Actually, I mean, I've only been drawing really as an adult in any sort of consistent way since 2018. So I was 60 when I started drawing really as an adult. I've only been drawing in ink for 3.5 years, maybe. So now 3.5 years is a long time if you're 20, and it's no time at all at my age. So would I go back and do it differently? Look, there were lots of reasons why I spent like 30 years not doing any art at all, or hardly, just the odd thing here or there. Usually if someone asked me to do something for some reason, there's a reason. There are reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into now. But we can overcome our reasons. We can overcome our issues is probably the upshot of all that. But also those years were the busy family life years with lots of kids and a mortgage and a job that required me to be up at the crack of dawn and to drive to work in peak hour traffic, bumper to bumper on a motorway. But even in those years where I mean, I could have made some time to do a 20-minute drawing twice a week. But for all sorts of reasons, I wasn't going to. But I would sit on the motorway in bumper to bumper traffic, both directions. It would be morning sun and late after, like dawn and late afternoon. And so the sun was always low in the sky. And a lot of the motorway, particularly up near where I live, has just big old gum trees alongside both sides. And so this morning light would be penetrating the canopies, the tree canopies. And I would be thinking, how would you paint that? See, I'd stop painting because it all became like too stressful and, whatever. But too much insecurity, I think. But it was still in me. And so I was just looking at the light going through the canopies and the colours and the golds and the shades and the shadows and all of that, the edges, thinking, how would you capture that? So I was thinking that for like, as I said, 30 years. And so when I began painting, see, I actually painted for 10 years before I began drawing as an adult. That's what I was painting, and there's a big tree, and there's a tree canopy up there. So when I began painting, and there's some wattle there, when I began painting the tree canopies that I'd been looking at, and I'm sure all that observation and all that thinking really helped me, because um, it was, I'll just get this out of my hand so that I'm not shaking it so much. I'm sure it really helped me, because um, I'd been thinking about it, and I didn't realize, but what I'd been doing was I'd been developing my understanding of the painting process, even though I'd barely ever, done hardly anything with oils in my life, and I was wanting to paint with oils when I did start. Um, yeah, that time just thinking about it jump started. Now, there were things I had to learn by just putting paint on the canvas, but a lot of the things I've applied to my drawing, I actually learned in my painting. The whole kind of um, like edges and values and creating form through value. All my hatching of trees, well, that came from my experience in painting trees, where, again, you can't draw shapes with a paintbrush. You're actually applying broad areas of value and colour, but colour and value. And yeah, I realised, well, I have to create value, but the edges are also important for a sense of depth. If you want things to be closer, um, if with painting, if you want so a challenge in a drawing such as this is to help the person looking at it to see 3 dimensions. And of course, the photo makes it look very 2-dimensional, because it captures all the detail equally. But what I need to do when I paint is to change the edges. So the closest edges, even though this is actually a fuzzy, this is wattle, so I think it's called mimosa in Europe, but even though the edges of all these flowers are fuzzy, I have sharper edges here because this is closer than down here because these are further away. We're looking at these on the other side. Now, these ones in light, I've also got some warm, warm undertones in the yellows and the oranges and sort of the pumpkin colours. But in here, I've got a cooler undertone, bluey undertones, cool blue undertones, because they're in shadow, and they're further back, and shadow has cool undertones. There's a shadow being cast on these by what's above. Up here it's still in the sun, so it's warmer, but the edges become very blurred because that's significantly further back than here and here, because these are coming out towards us. Now, it's not obvious in this view, but it's what's happening. The other thing that helps us create the effect of depth with colour is that brighter colours come forward. And so even though all of this yellow is the same yellow in life, if I were to pick a sprig of wattle from anywhere in this scene from the bush, it's exactly the same colour. I've made the closest wattle not just lighter, but brighter, a brighter yellow, and I've dulled the yellows as they sit further back and soften the edges. So that's how that sort of stuff. And I learnt all that in my painting for 10 years. And so then when I began to draw, those techniques were in the back of my mind, but it was, how do those techniques translate with, well, firstly with graphite, which was a little easier, because with graphite, we can hold it flat and we can create value rather than line. But with ink, I create line. And so how can I use line with ink to create the effect that will capture what I'm seeing in my reference? You see, can you appreciate how when we stop thinking that drawing is copying and we start to think of it in perhaps more helpful ways, I have no idea how that will actually. I think that painting is available on my website. I have no idea. Yes, gosh, I hadn't thought of that. Look, it would be expensive from Australia, and I don't even know how to protect it because it is quite large. Um, um, yeah, I mean, send me an email if you're interested. I wasn't trying to hawk my paintings. That wasn't the purpose of this, but yeah. Um, yeah, so I'm now distracted in my head. Please hit the like button if that little painting episode was interesting. I am wanting to somehow try and start doing watercolors. I really haven't used watercolors, and the few times I have, when I first started drawing in pencil, just splashing some watercolor onto pencil drawings, I was really using it as if it were acrylic. My oil painting approach and thinking and techniques were really not being used well, were not using the watercolor well. I wasn't exploiting the washes and the serendipitous parts of it. So, yeah, yeah. Okay, well look, it's we are over 2 hours, so I think I might give my head a break and bring this to a close. But look, I hope you found this interesting. I will go and post the photo now on my community page. So if you want to have a go drawing that cluttered, that multi-layered, cluttered foreground view of the church, and just play around with creating that depth and that separation of cluttered layers, and manage to keep all the scale consistent at the same time, why not give it a go? Great example for that. And I will have a look and I'll read all the comments. There's just too many for me to go back now. So welcome, please. If you haven't hit the like button, please do. If you've just joined now, I'm sorry, we're about to finish, but as soon as I stop this, it'll be available from the beginning. So why not go back and watch me actually do the drawing, which is not nearly as long as the video. Anyway, Stephen Travers, thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye. That's very kind.